Hello everyone, Eb here. Let's pick up where we left off. Here's part 2 of the E36 weekend/track car build. So now we are concentrating on the front of the car, and there is a lot of stuff to do up front. So let's take a look at my table. I don't have everything unboxed, and the reason why I don't have everything unboxed because there's just so many different parts, and honestly I just don't have enough space on the table to do that. And plus I will be bringing a car in real quick for a quick little thing, so I need that little open base. So let's take a look real quick. I'm just going to do a quick little rundown on those parts, and then as I go install them I'll give more information on the parts that we're installing. So yeah, let's take a look at the boxes of joy. All right, so here we are with a lot of boxed parts, a lot of goodies. So there is a lot, so let's go kind of straight into it. So originally these are some, oh, you can't even see it in the frame. There's a box right there. They have the almost solid with the center polyurethane mount. We decided or TC decided to not have those installed, so we're doing some OEM. They're not gel filled, there are solid mounts, so we're going to install those. Then we have the new filter housing with the cooler line, so we're going to have that's going to be installed with the cooler. The cooler is sitting back over there with the cooler lines and all the other stuff. On the actual cooler itself, there is a valve that I'm going to replace as well. We'll touch base with that when I get ready to do that, so that will be done. And then in this box we just got some links for the suspension and your sway bar links, because we're using the AGK ones. And then also we got some lower control arms. We have a relocation for the radiator to bring it in a little bit further to get it away from the motor, so we have those in there as well. We got some semi-solid training mounts. I got to see if we're going to end up installing those or not. So in this box we just have the belts, we have all the tensioners for the car itself, and then in this box we have all the coolant hoses, a new clutch fan, so we have that there. We got the radiator, we have the Stewart water pump, and we have the hoses. And back over here on this side we have the M50 intake manifold, and then we also have the installation kit for that, so that will be installed as well. Like in that box there's a couple miscellaneous stuff. We have the oil pan gasket, that's pretty much it. Mainly more that contains a lot of the stuff for the oil cooler. So up on the table itself we've got the Hard Motorsports brake duct system here, and then we also have new tie rods and bellows for the 712 yellow tag steering rack that we're going to be installing. We did order one from the Rack Doctor. Unfortunately, with also reading some of the forums, we're not the only one that's still been waiting on it. So it's one of those that we found one locally. We have it. I'm going to clean it up and just install that and see what happens with the one from Rack Doctor. So also we have the front cross member. The cross member's already been reinforced. I got that installed, and also it's been repainted. We have the sway bar in the back, and this is what I got to work on today. This is the oil pan baffle. So we're going to be installing that. I unfortunately do not feel comfortable yet welding aluminum. I'm still learning, and I don't want to learn on somebody else's car, so I'm going to take this and get this done. Also with the oil pan I have the new this is more of a sturdier oil pan, and it's sturdier because of the tabs. So this tab here, they've been known to break off because it's only a one spot weld, the original one. So this one has been modified, and it's been welded in two places, so the tab won't separate from the pump. So that's what we've got there. And then since we'll have the oil pan down, might as well, most of the hard work has been done. We're going to be installing ARP bolts with rod bearings, so we'll be doing that as well. We're also going to be going through the whole entire power steering system. So like I said, the rack, and then we have all the hoses back over there. We also replacing the yoke from the rubber yoke with a solid one, and then we have the reservoirs there as well. We have to finalize the brake lines, and we have the AKG front bushings, and then of course we're using for the brake fluid, we're using Motul 600. And that's pretty much just a quick rundown of everything that's here. There is a lot of boxes. This is probably 3 times of the boxes that we had for the rear end, so there's a lot of stuff. But yeah, so what I'm going to end up doing now is I have a lot of stuff already removed from the car itself from underneath. So what I'm going to do is tackle to drop the oil pan and get that to the welder real quick and start installing the rod bearing. So let's take a look underneath the car real quick. All right, so the rear front subframe has been removed with the steering rack, and yeah, so I got the engine supported up top, and now I have access to the oil pan. So next thing I'm going to do is just drop the oil pan. So take all these 10 mils out, clean her up, and then take it to the welder, and then I'll be heading back this way. So stay tuned for that. See you in a bit. The oil pan is back from the weld shop, and yeah, so here is the original baffle. It has just 2 slots that go into the pan, and then the one rivet that needs to be technically cut off, which is on this section right here. Yeah, she went off pretty well, cleaned everything up, and what I end up doing is having the welder weld 3 spots here towards the section here, and then 2 up there, and yeah. So no oil starvation, so it should be good. This is the first time that I've installed one of these. You know, so far so good on the OEM ones, but there have been the cases to where there is oil starvation. So that will take care of that. And to jump into the oil pump itself. So here is the old oil pump, and this is why we went with a newer one. So if you take a look at this section here, there's only one section that is technically holding this pump in, or this tube in place with the pickup tube. With the new one, there is 2 welding points. So there's this section here, and then one up here on the tube itself. So this one is stronger for the vibration of being on track. So a lot of people have been swapping over to one of these. Now, if you're interested, and here is the part number. It's 11411703930 is the oil pump itself from BMW. Now, so the other things that we got going on is we got the bearings, of course, and then the ARP bolts. The bearings are coated, WPC'd, so we got that taken care of with the ARPs. And then one more step, we've got the lock nut for the oil pump. Now, we were back and forth originally when we were first starting this. Should we weld it? Should we do this? And I was like, you know, he plans on doing other stuff. TC does down the road. So I said, let's just make it simple and easy in case anything needs to be removed. Instead of having to cut anything off, I have to buy a new pump. We'll just take the nut off. So we're going to end up doing it that way. So that pretty much will cover the oil pan. So right now I'm going to go ahead and start on the bearings, and then I'll work on the pump itself, and then put everything back together. The rod bearings have been done. The tube has been installed as well, the oil pickup tube, and then the nut has been installed on the oil pump. I did remove the oil pump to do all that. It's just so much more easier. So while I was doing that, I went ahead and took the radiator out of my way. That way I could have a little bit more better clearance to get the crank pulley nut so that I could rotate the engine. And at this point, the only other thing I'm going to end up doing at now is going to remove and replace the new motor mounts, and I'm going to start installing the cross member, setting the engine down, because I got to have the engine down to do the rest of the stuff. So I had to get this one done first. I've already started cleaning the 712 yellow tag power steering rack. As I might have mentioned before, we did order one from, or TC ordered one from the rack doctor. And it's been a while, and as I mentioned, there's probably a little bit of an issue. So we found a used one. I found one, I would say locally, but not so locally. It was a little bit of a drive to go get it, cleaned it up, and I'll be installing that here in a few minutes. So let me keep plugging away at it. But before we jump on all that, let's take a look at the bearings that I removed from the motor. Keep in mind, I think the engine has 147,000 miles. So let's take a look at them real quick. All right, so the ones on the upper are the ones that came off of the rod, and the ones on the lower where it says cap, those are the ones that came off the rod caps. So if we just start looking down at cylinder number 1, 2, 3 is the one that shows a little bit more wear. and then you have 4, 5, and 6, which, you know, you can see they're just little spots. None of them show any bearing material, bronze material or copper material or nothing of that sort. So we were technically still good, but for what the car is going to be used for, it was a very good idea for us to go ahead and get this knocked out. So sweet, 2 thumbs up. Gonna keep plugging away. All right, so unfortunately I had to stop on the cross member. I forgot to clean and paint the bolts, so I did that. So the bolts have to dry. So in the interim, while that's drying, I went ahead and jumped on the new yellow tag 712 ZHP rack, quicker ratio than the stock OEM one. So so as I stated before, we had one ordered from the rack doctor. Unfortunately, we've been waiting a little bit too long to where we bought a used one, and I'm going through it to make sure it's in good condition for the most part, and cleaning it up and installing all the new bits and pieces on it. So right now what I'm going to end up doing is kind of going through the process of what I did to get to this point. So firstly, what I end up doing is I plugged off my 2 holes here for the parts cleaner. That way none of the materials or even the brake cleaner gets in there. Clean the whole entire rack off. Now before I end up doing all that, the first thing I end up doing is I checked the shafts. Now the shafts, this is going to be the most important part out of the shafts, is if you have surface rust on it, you have to make sure that it's just surface rust, and then it's not rust that's been in there for a long time that has created pit marks in the actual shaft itself. So that you got to look at that, because if it has pits in the shaft, the fluid's going to get by it, and you're going to have a leaky rack. Okay, so you got to do it on this end, and you have to do it on this end as well. So yeah. So with it being completely cleaned, I put my plugs on it and make sure everything is good to go. Yeah, and pretty much this is what we get. It's nice and clean now, so ready to start installing the rest of the pieces. So let's break down on some of the other parts that we're going to be doing to this thing real quick. So with the OEM yoke, we will be removing this and installing a solid one. So the bottom one, or the short one, goes to the rack, and then this one goes to the shaft itself, the steering shaft. Okay, so that one's there and out of the way. Now the other thing is to get this on here. You will have to trim this. Like, I have to cut this piece to get that section on there. The E36 one is a fatter slot, so let's take a look at it, because I left it here just for this. So if you look at it and you can see the lines, you can tell this one has got a bigger gap than this one. So I just cut it off, because that's the whole thing, is I want to keep this on here, because I do not want to introduce any oil down the road in this, because then the rack heads start leaking and you're just going to get a bunch of dirt. I have seen a bunch of these racks come from many different places with this missing. You have to have it on. I mean, for me, I must have it on, so I have that on. So all I'm going to do is just cut it literally right across from right here, straight across, and that's it. Okay, so the other thing is, when we're going to do this and install that piece on here already, I'm going to go ahead and lube up this section here. Okay, so by adding grease to here, it's going to lube up the actual shaft itself. That's one section that does not get much oil on that end right there. So we want to make sure, because if you really look down in there, you can see the teeth from the shaft right here. So we want to make sure that that's lubed up. And another thing too is when I will be cleaning this up and adding the grease, I will make sure that the grease is only on the gears itself and not on the shaft, because if you introduce grease to it, you could technically defeat the purpose of the seal, and some fluid could come out, and then you're going to have a leaky rack. Okay, and at that point, what I'm going to end up doing is the work. I'm going to go ahead and cut this section off, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the grease to it, and then I will install the inner tie rods. So I'm going to get to it. Alright guys, so got a little issue here, and my bad for not really kind of digging in when I was talking to TC about this, but we got the wrong inner tie rods. Now there is a difference between the E36 inner tie rod and the E46 inner tie rod. And let me go over one quick thing now. On the E36 tie rod, it comes with a little lock washer. E46 does not use it, so we don't need that one. We could take those back. But the difference between these two, this is the E36. I'm going to spin it around so you can take a look at it. You can see, just keep an eye on it. Everything looks smooth, everything looks the same. Now the E46 one, you see that little slot? Well, that little slot is a breather. Okay, so that's how the rack breathes, so you can equalize the pressures between the right side and the left side. You technically need this. So now, when I started installing these, pretty much the rule of thumb was you have to use the inner tie rod of the E46 and you have to use the outer tie rod of the E36. And there you go. That's the reason why I did a video on this probably about 1.5 years when I installed this. I didn't go into grave detail, but I did mention that you have to use the inner tie rod of the E46. So that's where we're at. And when we do install the E46 one, we don't use this. Again, this is for the E36. This is the lock washer for the inner tie rod. So at this point, that's what I got to end up doing. I got to order some new tie rods, inner tie rods, and go from there. So I'll pick this video up here later on. I'm gonna try to get these quick. Overnight shipment is very expensive lately, so I don't know if we're gonna pull that. But fortunately for TC and I, we still have a lot of stuff to do on the car. So yeah, hopefully we can just get it here for second day, maybe third day, and I'll still be able to install it and get that done. Like I said, there's still a lot to do on the car. So yeah, I'll pick this up here later on. All right, now that the engine has been lowered down on the cross member, the upper brace has been removed. The home stretch is near. The home stretch is near. So the next thing I will be doing is I'm going to replace the transmission mounts, which are here. Like I stated, these are the AKG ones. Going to go ahead and install that. Also, while I'm there, I'm going to replace the fuel filter, which is behind this little area right there. Go ahead and get that knocked out while I'm there. And what I'm going to end up doing is I was originally going to install the rack real quick, but before I do that, I will go ahead and install the lower control arms and also install the polyurethane bushings on the R tabs for the front tabs right there. I'll go ahead and get that done. It'll be so much easier to do the control arm nuts here with nothing in the way here. It'll be so much better. So I'm going to go ahead and get that knocked out, and yeah, I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so got one of the transmission mounts installed. There was a little bit stuff I had to do to the brace. First I cleaned it, and each one of these mounts has a little nipple where the OEM. Let's see if I can find it. Where the OEM mount goes to. Those have to be ground down, and also because of the studs on the new tranny mount, you have to drill, or I had to end up drilling the holes a little bit bigger, which also puts me to say that I had to do the same thing to the front cross member with the these AKG mounts. So I mean, it is nicer to have bigger bolts, but the bolt size is never what sheared off around here. It was just mainly more of the mount. So yeah, so I had to modify this a tad bit to be able to get these to work, and yeah, so I'm just gonna keep plugging away. Okay, so had to modify the washers, make them flat so that they would fit on the transmission itself. They were just too big, couldn't use it, and I did not want to not install the washers. So I looked at my bins, I didn't have any of them that would fit there nicely, so that's what I ended up doing. It's just I did both of them that way. So now, hopefully no more modifications. I could go ahead and get this thing bolted in and keep moving forward. So yep. Okay, so I mentioned earlier about having to drill out the hole for the front cross member, and here's the reason why I had to do that. Let's take a look at the motor mount. Unfortunately, this one's a little bit different than the one I installed, but hopefully I'm able to at least explain it. So let's take a look at the old motor mount that came out. All right, so on the old motor mount, if you could see this section here, that square insert technically, that actually
protrude out enough to where it would not go in through the current hole. Now the actual stud itself was okay, but it was just this section here, it stuck out, I want to say at least more, about 1/8 of an inch. So that's why I had to end up drilling out the hole a little bit bigger so I could technically get all that in there. As you can see, this one's flush, and the one that I end up installing is not flush. So yep, that was the issue.
All right, everyone, I'm going to end part 2 right here. I will pick up part 3 here shortly. And yeah, like always, guys, hit the like button, subscribe, and hope to see you in part 3.